If I asked you what kind of frames InDesign had, you'd probably answer text frames and graphic frames, maybe unassigned frames that don't have anything in them. But InDesign has another kind of frame too that most folks don't know about: button frames, usually just called buttons. Buttons are only useful when you're making interactive PDF files, but they can do all kinds of things like jump to another page, play a movie, or even hide or show other objects on the page. The fastest way to make a button in InDesign is to use the button tool. Over here, underneath the other frame tools, is the button frame tool. And most people don't even see it there because they're not used to doing interactive PDF files. But I can make a button simply by selecting that tool and dragging out an area. There we go, there's our button. Now, buttons are frames just like text frames or graphic frames, so I could place a picture or text in there by choosing Place from the File menu if I want to. Or I could simply put some text in here using the Type tool. I'll zoom into 200% with Command 2 on the Mac or Control 2 on Windows, and I'll just click inside that frame and then say, this is a button. There we go. We've got some text inside of our button. Here's another way to make a button. I'll use my Selection tool to select this text frame over here, and then I'm going to go to the Object menu, scroll down to the Interactive submenu, and choose Convert to Button. Now it's a button. Looks the same, but it actually works as a button now. If we didn't want it to be a button anymore, it's easy to turn it back. We can just go to the Object menu, choose Interactive, and choose Convert from Button. That turns it back. But in this case, we really do want it to be a button, so I'm going to leave it set to that. Buttons act like normal objects. They print just like anything else on your page, but you can also apply behaviors to them. So to do that, we need the Button Options dialog box. I'll go ahead and select this button, the first one we made with the button tool. I'll go to the Object menu, go down to the Interactive submenu, and choose Button Options. The Button Options dialog box gives us the option to change the name. I'll just leave it set to button 1. You can type in a description if you forget what it is or what it's supposed to be doing. And you can also set its visibility in the PDF. You have 4 options here: visible in the PDF or hidden. Do you want it to start off hidden? Do you want it to be visible but not print? A lot of buttons, you don't really want them to print out from the PDF. You just want them visible there. Or do you want them hidden but they print? And this is an interesting one because sometimes you want information that doesn't appear on the page when they look at it in Acrobat, but it does print. So you have a lot of options here to play around with. Let's go over to the Behaviors tab, and here's where you start adding different behaviors to your objects. The first thing you need to do is choose an event. What event do you want to apply a behavior to? Mouse up means when you click down with the mouse and then let go, right? When you let go of the mouse button, that's mouse up. You can also choose mouse down, so when the mouse button gets clicked down. Or for rollovers, which we'll talk about in just a moment, mouse enter or mouse exit when you roll over something or roll off of it. And focus and blur, in Acrobat, you can tab to an object. Any of these buttons, you hit the tab key to go over to it. And focus means you tab onto it. Blur means you tab off of it. So that's just a little terminology there. That's what those events are about. But we're going to leave this set to mouse up for right now, and we're going to choose a behavior. And you have a lot of different behaviors here. For example, you can do something with movies or sounds, and we'll be talking about those later in this chapter. You can change the view zoom. Let's change something else here. Let's say go to next page. So it'll just grab the next page and show it to us. And you can choose the zoom here. Don't forget to click Add. Click the Add button, and now this is part of our behavior. I'll click OK, and now we have a behavior assigned to that button. Now I need to tell you something about how InDesign handles text frames in buttons. So that is text inside of a button. It actually makes a text frame inside a button frame. And we can see that easily by selecting this with the Selection tool and going up to the Select Content button in the Control panel. When if I click on that once, you'll see that now the text frame is selected inside the button object. And if I press the arrow keys on my keyboard, you can see I can actually pull this right out of the text frame. It's still there. I'm just clicking on the arrow keys, but it's moving around inside that button object. It's nested in here. So I'm just going to use the arrow keys to position this where I want it on the page. Let's talk about rollovers for a moment. I want this text over here, this headline, to look different when I roll the cursor on top of it. So I need to change not its behaviors, but its state. And you can do that by going to the Window menu, going down to the Interactive submenu, and choosing States. There's actually 2 different ways of doing rollovers in InDesign, and I'm going to show you both of them. First, with the States panel. It lets us see the button name here, and I'm going to change that to Dragonwell Heading, just so I know what that is. I better type that properly. There we go, Dragonwell heading. And we can see that this currently only has one state, the up state. That's the regular resting state of this object when I'm not doing anything to it. But if I click on the New State button, we now get a state called Rollover. And this is really wacky, what this does. Let me scroll this down so we can see this whole text here. We can see that this now has an up state and a rollover state. And the rollover state can look completely different from the up state. And I'm going to use the effects panel to show you how you can do that. First, I'm going to select the text frame inside that button. So I'll choose Select Content like we saw just a moment ago. Now we've got the text frame inside that button. I'll go to the effects panel, and I'm going to change the effect of this rollover. I double-clicked on the effects icon here to open the effects dialog box, and I'm going to say I want this to have an outer glow. I'll just make some really big, wacky outer glow. Let's say preview is on. Let's increase the spread here so we can really see that more dramatically. Make that bigger. There we go. We've got a glow that's going to show up, but only when we have rolled over the object. So I'll click OK, and we can see that back in the states panel, oh, it's blank. Why is it blank? Because we don't have the button selected. We only have the text frame selected. So I need to click on here as well, or I could come up here and click on Select Container, because the container of this text frame is the button. And as soon as I do that, we now see that the button itself has two states, an up state and a rollover state. And right now, rollover is selected, so that's what we're seeing. But if I click on up, we can see that that effect goes away. So we have two different states, up and rollover. It's as simple as that to make a rollover. I'll close the effects panel here, and I'm going to show you a different way of doing a rollover. In this case, I want my rollover to be, when I roll over this text, I want this image to appear. And when I'm not rolled over it, I want that image to be hidden. So I'm going to select both of those, go to the Object menu and choose Convert to Button. So now I've got two different buttons, because you can only hide or show another button. So I had to turn this into a button, even though I'm not going to be assigning any behaviors to it. Now, I'll select just this object. I'll do a Command-Shift-A to deselect everything, or Control-Shift-A on Windows. And I'm going to go to Button Options for this text frame. Now, I could open the Button Options dialog box by going down to the Object menu, going down to the Interactive submenu, and so on. But it turns out that I can get there faster by Option double-clicking on the Mac or Alt double-clicking on Windows on a text frame. Or if it's an image frame, I can simply double-click on it. Just double-click on this, and it opens it right up. In fact, I'll do that right now. I just double-clicked on this image, brings me up to Button Options, and why don't I give this a name? I'll call this Teapot. And I'm going to make the visibility in this PDF hidden. So when I first open this PDF file, that image will be hidden. I'll click OK. Now, as I said, I'm going to Option double-click on this text frame, or Alt double-click on Windows. I'll just call it Text1. You can call that anything you want. And I'm going to change the behavior so that on mouse enter, in other words, when the mouse enters the object, do something. The behavior will be show or hide fields. Fields is another bit of Acrobat terminology. A button is technically a field, but you just have to know that button, field are kind of interchangeable. So show hide fields. Which ones do we want visible? We want the teapot to be visible, so I'm going to click in this little checkbox here, and we see a little eye. That little eye icon means make it visible. Then I'll click Add, and we can see that on mouse enter, we're going to show that. Now, on mouse exit, we want to hide it. So I'll click twice on it, one to show and twice to show. We can see a little red line through that. That means hide it again, and I'll click Add. So now I've created a rollover for this object, which will hide or show this image. Click OK, and we're good to go. There's no special states for this one, so I might as well put that panel away so we don't need to look at it anymore. And that's it. We've got an interactive document to work with. Let me zoom back here with a Command-0 or Control-0 on Windows and look at it. Looks pretty good. Let's make our PDF. We'll go to the File menu, choose Export. We're going to make it a PDF file, and click Save. In earlier movies, I pointed out how you have to turn on bookmarks to get the bookmarks, or the hyperlinks checkbox to get the hyperlinks. For buttons, you must turn on interactive elements. Buttons are interactive elements, so you have to have this one turned on in order to get your buttons. I'll click Export, and InDesign exports our PDF and opens it in Acrobat. We can see the button here. If I hover over it, the cursor changes to a little hand sign. Go off of it, and we get the regular sign. So this actually is a functioning button. Also, when we roll over the headline, you can see it's a functioning rollover. It just gives us exactly the effect that we assign to that rollover. This one doesn't do anything though. If I click on it, it highlights, but there's no behavior applied to it. And now let's look at our second rollover. Hover over the text down here and the image appears. Go out of the text and the image disappears. So you have two different kinds of rollovers, one using states and one using behaviors. And then finally, let's see if this button works. We're going to click on that, and yes, in fact, it takes us to page 2, the next page, which is exactly the behavior we told it to do. Obviously, any part of your document can become a button, from text to graphics, even lines. Once you're an Acrobat, you can do even more things with buttons than in InDesign. If you want more information on that, check out the Acrobat Professional Beyond the Basics title in the lynda.com online training library.